This is your host, Chris McCormick. Appreciate you all tuning in. Last week's episode was very special in the fact that it was a recap of Ironman Waco. If you have not yet listened to that, I encourage you to go do so. It truly was one of my favorites, and I am truly blessed to bring that message, and I really could not have done it without you all. So thank you in advance. Thank you in result of you listening and tuning in. And today's episode, we're going to continue this conversation on endurance and shift gears a little bit to the topic of running. You know, one thing I realized in that Ironman process, the training and the race, was that there was quite a bit of improvement done in every aspect, from swimming, biking, and running, but most notably in the running. And part of the reason I'm able to say that is because I had a pre-existing experience with running. You know, I had been running now for probably let's say 3 years, and also prior to that, more casually, I would run specifically in 5Ks and just kind of here and there. You know, I kind of grew up running. I can recall in the high school days when my neighbors Maddie and Ben Haas and my siblings Colleen and sometimes Kate, I believe, would go out and just go for a quick 30 minute run, 3-mile run somewhere in the town of Hebron, Connecticut. And now that I'm here in this position and running the half marathons, the marathons, the Ironmans, it's fun to look back on. And for some reason, I have this clear picture of those, what at the time was a longer run in the 3 to 4 mile range. But now, kind of looking back, I laugh, and I find it to be encouraging to see where we were at that time. I know it's probably 5 to 10 years ago, probably closer to 10, but it is fun to see. And one of the things that I look back on is the fact that at the time I was discouraged quite a bit because I didn't think I had much speed in me. And for those of you that don't know, I do have siblings, one of which is Colleen. She's my closest in age. And my younger sister, she actually just celebrated a birthday on October 28th, so happy birthday to Colleen. But one of the things that she would do when she was growing up would be running, and she would do it very fast. And I can't remember exactly whether she was the fastest in our family, but it was almost embarrassing to me how close we were, and probably she was probably a little faster than me. And I stand here today to now say that is no longer true, although I'm sure it could be, because she's not giving up on the running dream at all. She's actually training for a half marathon in the coming weeks, I think on probably November 13th maybe. But I say that because one of the topics that I want to talk about today, and this overarching theme, is why I run and why I encourage others to run, and the things that I have learned through running and through reading about running and to listening to people who also have a passion and a love for running. One of the talking points that I have down here is the idea that you can track your progress fairly easily. You know, there's 2 ways to track this progress that I have written down, and that's speed and distance. And for the longest time, for the previous 3 years, I guess, the one that I would look most notably upon is the distance. But what is starting to become more relevant and more personal is the tracking of speed. You know, this Ironman training gave me the ability to increase that speed because I was on a regimented program that was lined out for me, and part of the program was to increase your speed so you could give everything you got in that marathon and do it to the best possible ability, both in energy and speed. And it worked out just well. I think I had one of the top mile times in the entire race population, and part of that was because I was on this regimented program. So the first talking point I want to discuss is the fact that you're able to track your progress relatively easy. As far as distance goes, you clearly know how far you're going each and every time. And while it can be almost intimidating to branch out further than you've gone, especially starting out, something I realized was the jump from like 3 miles to 5 miles seemed like a pretty big jump, and it kind of is, because that's 66% increase, 2 added miles on top of the 3, that's 66%. So while that's true, as you begin to stretch yourself a little bit more, you start to realize that, wow, I can go this much further. And now instead of 3 miles, I'm up to 5 miles. And soon enough, I'll be up to 7 miles. And then once I'm at 7, I could probably start to get into those double digits. And before you know it, you're running a half marathon. And I look back just 2 years ago, it's incredible to look back and think about where you were. And 2 years ago, I was preparing, and I think I had just finished up a half marathon, 13.1 miles. And I remember when I was training for that, especially going into it, the weeks leading up, when you start to pick up the distance and you get to that 10 or 11 mile range, which is where you cap it off, that took a lot out of me, and that felt like a lot. And it was at the time, because my fitness level wasn't where it is now, and it was the furthest I had run. That was the first time I had gotten myself to go into the double digits, and it was empowering, but it would also knock me out. I would finish that 10-mile run on a Saturday morning, and I would be pretty much useless the rest of the day. I would be trying to lay off my legs and rest and recuperate as much as possible. But now, those 10 miles, that's a Tuesday or a Thursday, early morning. And so one of the most notable things about running is the ease of tracking progress. And I know you can do this in other sports. Weightlifting, you can easily track progress. You can either increase your reps or increase your weight. But there's something to be said about distances, because when you say, yeah, I just ran 13 miles, you think about that from a car, that's going to the next town over or a couple towns over. And it's pretty cool. And then as you continue to do that, you turn 13 into 15 into 20 into 26, and you're like, I just ran a marathon. And then you start to open your eyes up to what is possible, and you start thinking about these ultra marathons and the 50-mile distances, or the Ironmans and the triathlon, and just the ultra endurance stuff. And as you do that, you really you gain this confidence, because then you look back and you're like, wow, 5 miles now is nothing. So tracking progress, and then on the other side of the distance is the speed. Man, this is something, as I said, that used to be almost a limiting belief. Is like I used to cap myself off at the 7:50 to 8 minute mile range. And now I start to realize, like, the only reason that I was doing that was because I wasn't training properly. I would always try to increase the distance, but I wasn't really thinking much about the speed. I didn't see the beauty in training smaller distances at a higher speed, or training a medium-sized distance at a slower speed. And now I realize the benefit of that is that it increases your fitness level. And then so when you go to branch out to those longer distances, you can then increase your speed and decrease your tiredness. So that's the goal of these endurance sports, is to go for as long of a period as time, if you're lucky, as fast as you can, and to do it with exerting as little energy as possible. And so, I mean, the growth as far as running is concerned is pretty concrete, and you're able to tell how you fare because you can measure your success and the distance is covered over time. Another reason that I have found this love and passion for running is this idea that it can be meditative. And for me, I tend to go out in the mornings and run, and I also tend to do it without any headphones, which, if you haven't tried and you're kind of intimidated by it, I would encourage you to do so, because it might feel awkward at time, and you might be like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to think about? But then you'll start to get in this groove and what people call and refer to as the flow state, and that's where the meditation comes in. And I think part of that is how you think about it and how you look at running. You know, you can easily interrupt that meditative process by thinking of everything that's going wrong, and how tired you are, and how out of shape you are, and how much it sucks. But if you just push those thoughts to the side and think about how cool it is that you can run and cover a certain amount of distance in a certain amount of time, then you can hit that flow state and start to open your mind up to other possibilities. And so one of the things that I look back upon is that some of my, what I would refer to as my greatest ideas, or my most inspired ideas, have come from running. And one of those would be this podcast. You know, I was out on a run. I had just gotten off of a Zoom call, a personal development Zoom call. I had gone out on a run, and I was like, all right, let's just do it. Let's go get the equipment, start this podcast, and see where it goes. And then on top of that, a lot of the topics that I decide to discuss, including the one you are currently listening to, have come from running and going out there and just thinking for an hour and running over ideas in my head and seeing how they match up. And so the idea generation and the creativity that comes as a result of running has been plentiful. And I am not alone in this claim. And one of the authors that I subscribe to, Ryan Holiday, who I've talked about on this podcast in the form of Ego is the Enemy. He also has a great book, The Obstacles of the Way. He's a Stoic author and writer and podcast host. And he says that some of his greatest ideas have come as a result of running. And oftentimes when he goes out for a run, he'll come back and he'll have to avoid everything so that he can get all the ideas that came out onto a piece of paper, and then take that to his computer and write about it in the future. So I think you would surprise yourself if you gave yourself the time and the freedom to just think when you are covering this ground on a run. You know, it is easy, and it can be a little less of a struggle to put in the headphones and quote unquote not think about anything, but realistically you are thinking. And sometimes I realize that it can be kind of a distraction when I have headphones in. If it's not the right podcast or the right song, that takes me out of the peace and bliss that I get from writing or from running. And so nowadays I just choose to go without them, and I find it to be very beneficial. So I would encourage you to think of or to kind of start to take note of the thoughts that you have while on your runs, whether it's a smaller run or a longer run. You know, some of the best thoughts that I have on the shorter runs is like, how fast can I go? And sometimes it gets to the point where I'm like, I can't go any faster, and then I'm like, wait, maybe I can. And then I realize that, and I'm somehow hitting a mile in the sub 6 minutes, or right around the 6 minute mark, which for me seemed near impossible just 8 months ago, 9 months ago. You know, it's pretty crazy to see that. So you get this confidence, and it does take a little bit of time, and you have to be willing to admit that sometimes that voice that we talk about will creep in and say, this is not possible, or what are you doing, or slow it down. But if you want to improve the speed and you want to push yourself and see what you're capable of, then I encourage you to kind of ignore that voice and see just how fast or how far you can go within your limits, right? Don't risk injury. Don't risk something traumatic happening just because you were pushing your limits. Ease into it and then begin to see that you are capable of much more than you thought. You know, we can't just go from couch to Ironman. We have to actually start to train and put the small goals in before we can get to the big, hairy, audacious goals, as they call them. So the next point that I want to talk about, and this is something that I'm starting to realize and I'm looking forward to as we progress, is the idea that running can be social and a way to bond and come together. And I just started to realize this. You know, for me, I'm very good at going off on my own and doing things on my own. And sometimes I even think that I might be a little more introverted than I once thought, which is great, but also we need to be social. We're social creatures, and there's something about getting out there and doing things with friends, having conversations, getting together, and socializing. And so this past weekend, a couple buddies of mine and myself, we headed out onto the Charles here in Boston, and we just got some miles in. You know, I have a friend, Coleman, who is training for the New York City Marathon. He texted me saying that he was looking to get some miles in at a decent distance, but a slower pace. And I was like, I'm right there. I would love to do that. And texted another friend, Sam Dimmick, and one other, Tom Kavulich, and all of a sudden we have a running club, and we are referring to it as the Run and Grub Running Club in honor of Sam's Instagram page, where he posts about his workouts and also his diet and his food intake. I would encourage you to head over to the Running Grub Instagram page, and also just start to follow along, start to see what we're doing. And if you're in the Boston area, come get some miles in. You know, it doesn't have to be the long distance. There will be different distances, different paces, and the goal is just to bond over running. And this is something that I've seen in many of my friends from college, is that we're all starting to find this love and desire for running. I have a couple friends going out for the New York City Marathon. I have Connor Holloway, who is training for a 100-mile ultra marathon. He's run a 50-mile, he's run the marathon, and it's just cool to see. And so this is something that I'm very excited about, because for a while I've just gone out and in the early morning just gone and crushed 10 to 13 miles on my own, sometimes even more, which is awesome because you get to prove to yourself what you're capable of. But now I'm realizing the benefit. It is fun to go out there and just have a good time, talk about things. Some people refer to it as collective suffering, but I don't think there's much suffering in it. But if there is, then that's good too. And there's something to be said about pushing your limits together. And that's what I really look forward to about this running group. And as we advance and as we travel more too, there will be other cities, and I'd love to meet up with people in different areas and just go out there and go for a run. And another thing that I'm realizing through this is that there's a benefit in kind of slowing down sometimes. And while I would love to just go out there and push myself for 13 miles and run as fast as I can, sometimes that's not the best thing. And your fitness level can actually increase by going out there and getting a decent distance in at a slower pace and a lower heart rate, because you're increasing your tolerance for distance and you're getting the heart rate up to a level that is healthy and exercise, but it's not over the top where it will put you out and decrease your overall energy and honestly sometimes your overall fitness level. So I look forward to this. Again, it's the Running Grub Running Club. This weekend we're going out on Saturday. I'll probably only go for about 3 to 4 miles because I'm actually running a marathon on Sunday, which I'm excited for. But yeah, if you're in the Boston area, I would love to have you come along, meet some of the guys, and get some miles in. The next point of why I love running and why I run is this low cost of entry. One thing I quickly realized about the triathlon world was that it can be an investment. It is quite the investment. Those races cost money, the equipment costs money, and the travel costs money. And so while it's a great sport and I love it and I do believe I will stick with it, the thing about running is that it's very minimal cost of entry. You don't have to go out and spend certain amount of money on a nice bike. And I didn't do that, but when you get to the point where you're going to get serious about triathlon, that's probably a worthwhile investment. Whereas running, it's just shoes, maybe some shorts and a shirt, but it doesn't cost much to start. And I am now realizing that there is some benefit in investing in a nice pair of shoes, and I think I've often kept my shoes a little too long. And while we're young and have a body that is capable of absorbing that for the time being, I do believe that I will start to consider a good pair of running shoes as a good investment to make as I begin again to increase the fitness level and go out to some of these races with more competitive nature and a seriousness to them. I think having a good pair of shoes to go out there and race in is definitely beneficial. But overall, running is a low cost of entry, and it does not take a serious investment to get started and to continue. Shoes, I mean, the nicer pairs will go for like $200 to $300, but there's plenty of pairs, especially the older trying to think of the word. So the shoes, they come out each year. I mean, the older versions. So oftentimes when a brand comes out with a new pair of shoes, you can get the older version of that same shoe for cheap. And while it might not have the newest technology or all the benefits of the newer shoe, they still made it with a purpose, and that is to bring you the best possible version at the time. So if you are looking to get a nice pair of shoes but don't want to break the bank, I encourage you to look into some of the older versions of the top brands like the Nikes, the Saucony, the Hokas. And that's something that I now do, and I see as a very beneficial way to save money, but also to invest in your health and your fitness. And the last point, and my favorite, is the fact that in order to run, you have to get outside. And while you can go on the treadmill and run, it is much more fun to do it outside. And something I now realize, and I think other people do, is that there's a great benefit in getting some time outside, whether it's just 20 to 30 minutes or an hour to 2 hours. And that's why I do like running. I think this also plays a role in the fact that it's meditative, especially here in Boston. You can get out, run on the Charles. There's some great nature to observe, and there's something to be said about getting out in nature that cultivates the mind and kind of brings this calm and peace over you. And so if you see the benefit, or you feel like you need to get outside more often, I encourage you to fire up the running shoes, go out there, get a mile or two in, and see how it transforms the mind. And again, I can't encourage you enough to just take it slow. There's nothing worse than trying to go run a marathon when you haven't run a 5K and just getting discouraged right away and telling yourself how out of shape you are. You don't expect to be Usain Bolt or whoever the greatest marathon runner is right now the first time you go out. But all that matters is you start. And so start somewhere and gradually try to track that progress and increase that progress. And over time, you will start to build upon your fitness and your endurance. And before you know it, you'll be running the 5Ks, the 10Ks, the half marathons, the marathons, and who knows where you'll go. It's a great sport. It's a great way to cultivate the mind, to get some time to think, to converse, to be social, and to really just build a confidence. Because like I said, that tracking of progress is such a blessing, and it's so cool to see when you look back on however long you do to get yourself to either the distances or the speeds that you end up being at. When you look back to where you started, it's a crazy feeling. So I appreciate you listening. I hope this was of value, and I also hope and believe that somebody's going to go out there and go for a run as a result of this. If you are in the Boston area, I would love to touch base about this running club that we have going. We would love to get more people involved and share the beauty and bliss that comes with running. So God bless you all. I look forward to what's ahead, and I will talk to you all very soon.